In this video, we're going to cover part of an assignment, at least part of it anyway. Let me bring it up. And that is the traffic simulation. So traffic simulation is really, it sounds like, very official or something like that. What it really is the game Frogger, and I'll show you that just in a minute, just in case you've never played Frogger before. But I'm going to show you where the assignment is, and we'll put it in here, and it should be in Unity 1, and then go into Programming Assignments, kind of down at the bottom. I'm not sure if you can see it. Let me do this so we can see all of it. There it is. 2D traffic simulation. So we've sort of breached the subject of 2D work in our last class. We started making that breakout game, that Arkanoid game. We didn't get all that far, but really the objective was to just sort of get you used to the idea of working in 2D, since the course thus far has been entirely working in 3D. And the Arkanoid assignment, I admitted up front, was one that we'd never done before, and I thought it would be fun. And I was hoping that we could get it done in a single class, and it didn't work out that way. So we need to move on to the next thing, which is this traffic simulation thing, i.e. Frogger. And let me see if I can find some gameplay of Frogger. That would be not the arcade version. There's Atari Frogger. This is a game that was really popular back in like 1981, probably around about the time many of you were being born, but it was a lot of fun. So I guess these are all later versions of the same game. I was hoping that we could find the original Frogger, but I don't see it here. So I'm just going to pick the first one and see how it looks. Probably not how I remember it. Okay, so not bad. That's pretty much what it looked like on the consoles of the day. So you've got this frog that goes across the screen, and of course the objective is basically a survival game. You have to get past the traffic, and then you have to jump across the logs, and the objective is to get up here to the top and fill up all of these holes up here at the top. And there are certain bonuses along the way. There's a lady frog that you can help across the street. There she is. And there are flowers and bugs and things like that that you can get that will give you more points. But you can kind of see this is not very exciting down here. So the first thing we're going to do is duplicate this. We're going to duplicate this very evenly spaced interval between here. And then the gist of the assignment is to make it into a better traffic simulation. So we're going to start with this, make it fairly easy, and then we'll make something more advanced. And that'll probably be in the next class period. That's probably enough of that. One thing I'll point out, though, is that these hazards are the same thing. They're just in reverse, right? So here you can't collide with a car, and here you must collide with a log. And so the only thing that makes this hard, sometimes there's alligators too, and sometimes the turtles go underwater. So you don't want to jump on those, and you don't want to jump on the frog, or on the alligator. So there's a few extra, hurdles in there, but they're essentially the same hazard, just in reverse. So you don't want to hit the cars, but you do want to hit the logs. And other than that, they're pretty much the same thing. Okay, so we're going to get started on that. And I started off on this screen, which was Game Art Guppy. This is a site where you can go and get fairly reasonably inexpensive artwork. So we're a programming class. I'm assuming most of us, if you want to be a programmer, most people who can write code aren't as good at art, and vice versa. That just seems to be how it works. If you can do code and art, that makes you an exception to the rule. Good on you. But most people can't do both for whatever reason. And this was the assets that we're going to use today, the frog and the lily pad, came from this site a number of years ago. I don't know if they're still here or not, but they were free assets, I think back in 2014 when I first started doing this exercise in the Unity class. And I contacted the owner of the site. I think she's down here at the bottom, Vicky Wenderlich, and she gave us permission to use these assets on our projects for our class, for our coursework. Now, if you want to use these in your professional work, if you want to publish a game, then you need to contact Game Art Guppy, the site, and make sure you secure the rights to use the assets. But we have secured that just for educational use. That's not to say everything on Game Art Guppy you have access to. You don't. For this exercise, I secured these assets. This small number of, it's one sprite sheet and like one graphic, so it's not a lot of stuff. Okay, but I wanted to give a shout out. There's a lot of interesting artwork on Game Art Guppy that you can use, and it's not very expensive. So this is another resource that you can add to your growing list of resources. And so with that in mind, let's get this started. I'll go ahead and launch Unity per usual, and I'll go ahead and create a new project, which I will call Frogger Evolution 0. That just means I'm starting out, and I'm going to give it a place on a hard drive. And I'll give it a year since I wanted to remember when I did this. Okay, so there's Frogger Evolution 0 2016, and there it goes. And I'll create the project there. Darn it, I meant to hit the 2D button. And I always forget to do that. I think I'm going to go ahead and redo it. Usually I don't, but this time I think I'm going to, so we can really see what the difference is. So that was E. Let's go to here. I'll just get rid of it. Okay, launch again. New project, Frogger Evolution 0 2016. Frogger Evolution 0. This time I will click the 2D button. There we go. And it created it, and that's fine. Okay, so now we're in good shape. You'll find on the Blackboard site a number of assets that I've prepared. Forgive me, I'm still getting over this cold. A number of assets rather that I've prepared for this exercise, and everything's all packaged and ready to go. So I've downloaded that onto my desktop. So let me get my desktop. There they are, Frogger assets, and that's what we've got. So we've got a bunch of graphics and a font. So I'm going to grab all of these and I'm going to drag them into my assets folder. And it looks like all of these came in as sprites. They don't always do that. I was really hoping they wouldn't this time, but for whatever reason, it seems like whenever I'm going to show you guys this, they always come in as 2D sprites. And whenever I'm doing this not to show you guys, they always come in as textures. So it isn't uncommon for them to come in as a texture instead of a 2D sprite. And what you want to do in that case is you want to do what I just did. You select them in the assets window. We can select all of them at the same time, except for the font, because that would make it different, right? So select all of the assets that are images, and you can change them all at once. So if it says texture here, you can just change it to 2D and UI sprite, which is what you want. And the other giveaway is, do they have little open and closed triangles next to them? If they don't, then they're probably in as textures. And then the other dead giveaway is, I'll change one of them to a texture so you can see visually what they do when they're wrong. You don't see the transparency around it, so that's usually another giveaway. So you can see that open closed triangle is not there anymore, and our transparency is gone, so it thinks this is a texture. And sometimes it comes in as a texture when you import it, and sometimes it comes in as a sprite. All right, so there we go, and that's all fine. We're going to need a few things. We're going to need some streets, and I could have made street assets, but I chose not to. I made some of these assets myself, or sort of made them. Like this 80s SUV is out of my favorite rendering package, Carrara, and it's just a stock model that comes with that tool. So all I had to do is just drop this in, make a camera, point it down at the top of the thing, and render it out. It took about a minute and a half. It was no problem. And then the rest of these, I honestly don't remember where I got them, so I probably got them at Game Art Guppy. I might have made the grass. Again, honestly, I don't remember. But I definitely got the frog, which is a sprite sheet, and the rest of this stuff from Game Art Guppy. All right, and there's the lily pad. I thought maybe we could mix it up and have lily pads and logs in the top section, not just logs. Okay, so the thing that we're missing, though, would be streets. And I could have made streets, but it turns out that there's a really easy-to-use asset in the asset store. And so let's go and find that. And I'll just type in streets free here. And I'll get the free streets, and there it is, the simple modular street kit created by Jacek Jankowski, if that helps you search. Sometimes we don't get the exact same result every time, but they are free, and this is a 3D asset. So this is another point that I really wanted to make in our exploration of 2D work. You can use 3D assets in your 2D work. You just have to be careful as to your expectations. You can't have mixtures of 2D and 3D physics engines. That means colliders, that means rigid body components, anything like that. Those two engines don't work together. So you can't have a 2D collider interact with a 3D collider. It just isn't going to happen. But you can just use plain 3D artwork in a 2D project with no problems. And that's what we're going to do here. We're just going to download this, and that will add the last piece of assets that we really need for this project to be completed. That's going to take a minute to download, so I'm going to pause the video recording and wait till that's done. And once it's finished downloading, you'll get the usual import dialog. I'm just going to pull all of it in. We really only need part of it, but we're just going to pull all of it in. Okay, that's it. So now we have our streets, and let's open it up and see what we've got. So we've got all these prefabs down here, and we can see what they are. If we open them up and look at the geometry, it'll kind of give us a sense for what it is, so we can see it inside there. So we need something just really simple. And so probably what we want is probably street, one lane, and then some distance. So let's try a big one. Okay, that's probably just about what we need. So that's good. And let's go back to our scene, and let's start setting some of this up. All right, so it might be tempting to start with the street, but I'm actually going to go back up to my assets and drag some of these things in. So let's do the grass first. So I'll drag some grass up here, and the grass shows up pretty much at the beginning of the game at the bottom. So I'll just sort of tentatively place it here, and I can stretch this out if I'd like. I'll probably resize everything later, but this is a good starting point, and let's just get everything up there. So that's the first part. Next thing we need is going to be the street, so let's find our street. And we decided that we want a street, one lane, and we're just going to pick the longest one, which is 70 meters. I'm going to pick that prefab and drag it into my window, and I'm probably going to have to do some work on it. So I'm in 2D mode, and remember this is a 3D asset, so I'm going to come out of 2D mode for a minute, and now I can see what's going on here. My 3D street is in an axis that I really can't see it very well. So I'm going to need to change this a little bit. I'm just going to zoom in on it. I hit F and expected to zoom in, and it didn't really zoom in. It sort of centered it up, which is not really what I wanted. So let's zoom in a ways, and let's switch back over to 3D mode. Oh, that's why. Yeah, so it's pulling it there. All right, so let's do this. let's rotate this around so that it matches what we're expecting. And I'm just looking at the screen over here, so it looks like it needs to be on the rotation. It needs to be 0. Probably needs to be 180 here. And let's see if that does it. I'm going to leave that -92 there for a second. We probably don't need that. We could probably say, let's see what happens if we do 0. Okay, now it is the wrong way. So let's do 90 degrees. And now let's zoom in on it a little bit. Okay, and there are gaps in the geometry here. This is designed so that you can put grass, terrain, whatever in there. So that's why those holes are there. And so let's get this under control. Let's see what it looks like in the game. So in the game window, let's pull these apart so that we can have them up at the same time. We kind of need to figure out what we're doing with our assets here. So I'm going to click that grass again, and I'm going to select the sprite tool, and I'm going to move it over to the edge, and I'm going to resize it so it fills the whole game window. And now I need to resize my street so that it makes a little bit of sense visually. So let's move it up, and then let's resize it down by quite a bit. Oh, too much. And you can see we've got some issues we're going to have to deal with here with respect to what's happening when the game window interacts with this 3D object. But we'll fix all that. Let's just kind of get them lined up, and we'll figure out those issues. All right, so I'm going to stretch this out a little bit. I could probably get away with stretching it out a little bit. If I have to stretch it too far, I would probably just duplicate the object so that I don't have any issues with the bricks on the tiling stretching out and looking weird. But I think this is probably going to be okay. And I'm going to center mine up right like that. If I do it like that, I may actually not have any problems later, but we'll see. All right, so that's fine. Next, I will go ahead and I could figure out this part. I could either move this up and now move it back in space slightly, because again, remember, you're still dealing with a 3D environment. It's just you're only dealing with 2 of the dimensions. So if I move this back a little bit, then I'm going to get the result that I would expect, right? So that's probably what I want to do here. And I'm just going to move this down because on the other side of this, that's where the water's going to be. So we'll put that there. And now let's go back into our assets and let's put our water up there. I'll switch back over to 2D mode. And we have some water. It's called BG tile, but that's what it is. So we'll bring this out and put it here. And that's going to be our water. And I'll just line it up so that it looks okay. All right, so that looks okay. All right, now would be a good time to save my scene since I haven't done that yet. And I'll call my scene game. And that's looking okay. Probably going to need more more room in here eventually, but that's okay. And I know you can't see all of this is another problem. There's quite a bit of space at the bottom of my window. We can see the camera area here is actually taking up a lot of room, and we have this set to free aspect. It would probably be smarter if we set this to something like standalone so that we could actually see what an actual gameplay window might actually look like. Alright, so that's not bad. I'm going to pull this up so that you can see it a little better. So that's our gameplay window right now. So it's not going to win us any awards, but it is getting us towards our main objective. So let me save this. And the next thing we're going to want to do is fiddle around with a frog, I think. We'll go ahead and make our frog. But I think before I do that, it occurs to me that this is really dark. And the reason for that, of course, is we're used to, in 3D mode, it adds a light for us, but it doesn't do that in 2D mode. Let's add a light, just our usual directional light that we usually sort of take for granted. Okay, so that's better. That will show things a little nicer. If you want to fit around with the light, be my guest. I'm just going to leave it like that. And let's go ahead again and get started on our frog. Our frog is going to be kind of special with respect to things we've done in the past because he is a sprite sheet. So a sprite sheet looks about like, let's open up in Photoshop so you can see what it looks like. So a sprite sheet looks like this. So basically what it is it's a set of, pieces of artwork that are sort of stitched together onto a single graphic. And you've got everything you need here. So you've got your resting frog, you've got your frog jumping sequence, which is going to be basically this cell through this cell. So here's where he starts to jump up. He gets bigger as he comes out, he stretches out, and now he's starting to go back down again, and now he returns to his resting position. And then we have the sprite where the frog is presumably dead, so he's been hit by a car or something. So that's what a sprite sheet is, and it's a very handy way to do 2D animation. It's pretty much how all game engines do their 2D animation. And so let's take a look at how to work with a sprite sheet. I'm going to move my game window back over here so that I have a little bit more space back. And what we'll do for this is we're going to use a lot of the same techniques we used for 3D animation. We're going to be using Mecanum. We're going to be using an animator controller. All of that still applies, but we have to prepare our graphic first. So if we select Froggy in the Assets window, and we come over here to the import settings, you'll notice there's this setting here called Sprite Mode, and it says single right now. What we actually want it to be is multiple. So I'll select multiple and I'll click apply, and now it's going to see this as a sprite sheet. Well, before you can use it as a sprite sheet, you need to slice up the sprite sheet so that it knows where the individual images on the sprite sheet are. So for that, we're going to select the sprite editor, and there are a couple of different ways that you can slice up a sprite. You can do it automatically or you can do it manually. I think most people do it automatically. If you wanted to do it manually, you can just come in here and click and start drawing your slices like so. And your objective is, usually your objective is to make these as small as you can, because you don't want any extra pixels around the edge, and it's just an optimization issue. But I'm going to use some of the automatic methods so I can show you how they work. So I've done a little bit of slicing here. I'm going to click the revert button and make that go away. If you come over here to the slicing menu, you can see there are a couple of different options here. We can select automatic, which is basically going to automatically slice our sprite sheet up based on the transparency, and that's just a fast and easy automatic way of doing what I was doing manually a second ago. The other way to do it is to basically create a sprite sheet that is designed to be a grid. So this is not the case here, or I guess it could be. We could probably figure out what the size of this is. So if we sliced these into individual equally spaced grid pieces, it would probably work. But we would have to know the size of each of these. And the way to do that would be to go into Photoshop and measure them out. Probably even to use Photoshop's slicing tool to determine the size, the optimal size of the slices. But again, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the automatic method and just let Unity do the work for me. So I'm going to select automatic, and I'm going to select the slice button, and it's going to automatically slice these frogs up. You can't say that in any course except biology. It's going to automatically slice these frogs up according to the space around them. So that's what we need, and we can click apply here. And now we're good to go. There are a few other things here that you can change. There's the ability to drop out the color channels and only look at the alpha. This is something that animators do in order to look at the silhouette of the sprites that they're working on. You always want a strong silhouette so you can tell that the animation will stand on its own. That would be your basic animation course, and so hopefully you've had that already. If you haven't, then you'll learn about making a strong silhouette in your animation courses. We can turn that back on. The other options are going to allow us to size this up and down, and this is really just a magnification thing. It's not really changing the size of the graphic. And then likewise, we can change the level of detail that we're seeing. Usually you're just going to leave these alone, but those options are there. So once we've got everything sliced up, I've clicked apply, everything's gray here. We're now all set to start animating the frog.